Hi, for anybody who's already joined, it's only just 2 o'clock. We're just going to wait another 60 seconds or so before kicking off this event to allow more people to join. As soon as it's 14:02, I'll kickstart if that's all right. I hope that you can all see the screens and hear me fairly clearly. There is a chat. You've got the ability to pose questions if you want over the course of the event, and then towards the end, we'll, if we've got the time, ask those questions. So the chat function is now open, I believe. Okay, it's 14:02, so good afternoon, everybody. It's and thanks for joining this webinar. The webinar is called the One-to-One series, and it began initially because it was the young leaders of the Coronet members who were saying that they didn't get the chance often to talk to senior people within the real estate industry, and they were very interested to understand how some of these senior individuals progressed through their career. So we started doing these, and now this is probably, I think, the 8th interview. And if we could carry on, if that's all right. I'm just going to go quickly about, there's a number of Coronet events at the moment in the calendar, and apart from today's, the next one is this virtual leadership. If you haven't attended any of the events where Kirk Vallis has spoken, he's the head of innovation for Google, then you've missed a super event. And again, he's going to be speaking at this one. So we've got Major General Tom Coppinger-Symes, and then we've got Kirk Vallis from Google, and Mark Davis from IBM. So do register. And then here are the upcoming events. They're all on the LinkedIn page, so the Coronet UK LinkedIn page, so feel free to have a look at those. And then I just wanted to thank our sponsors. So we have IWG, IBM, Savills, and TP Bennett, and without them, we really wouldn't be able to host any of these events. But if I may, all the sponsors are obviously equally important to us within Coronet, but it's, I just wanted to say a few words about TP Bennett, that our condolences go out to them. They've obviously lost Richard Beastall, who was a great individual, and if you've had the pleasure of meeting him, he really was a force to be reckoned with, and I think the whole industry, I don't think it's just the Coronet, is going to miss him terribly, and TP Bennett, but I think he's the kind of individual that all of us are going to miss terribly. So I just wanted to say that. And then on a happier note, we are interviewing Gary Wingrove. We're very excited to be able to interview him. Gary is the Global Real Estate Capital Projects Director at Boston Consulting. So thank you so much for joining us, Gary.
Pleasure.
So as I said earlier, it's the young leaders that initially started this. So because it is the young leaders, we like to delve back and go back to how the career began. So I have obviously looked at your CV. We've obviously had a discussion. I've also looked at your LinkedIn page. And I just wanted to go back and understand your journey from college. You know, how did you decide that this was going to be the career for you? Did you have a mentor, you know, in your family that kind of opened the door for you, that helped you understand what it entailed? So if you don't mind, could you start from the beginning?
Yeah, we can do. So I guess mentor's probably not quite the right word. I don't think they even existed back in the dark ages of the 60s and 70s. But my family were in construction. My father was a ceramic tiler. My uncle was a carpenter and joiner. They had both sort of progressed and done quite well for themselves, sort of ending up running quite significant businesses in their own fields. And coincidentally, I ended up running my uncle's old business. Just a total coincidence, I ended up running that business some 20 odd years after he had left as MD. So So I guess my eyes were open to construction because of that. Because before the days of health and safety, I used to jump in the van with my dad on a Saturday morning, go to site and do some labouring and all that good stuff. So it just felt a very natural thing for me to do. I guess if I'm honest, I was far too interested in sport and I wasn't really very academic either. So I sort of saw myself, construction being a good fit for a sort of physical type of job outdoors, and all that sort of thing. And so I ended up deciding when I did finish my O-levels, I actually decided to go to college and study construction immediately rather than university or any other route. So I went to South East London College, which at the time was 50% sort of academic, running QS sort of construction, technical construction type courses, ONDs, ONCs, HNCs, that sort of thing. And the other half of the college was actually an apprentices college, so they were physically there learning how to be bricklayers and painters and decorators and carpenters and that sort of thing. So it was like going to college on a building site every day, which was great. So yeah, I don't think I ever thought of doing
Okay.
I was always going to join the construction industry. I guess I just didn't quite know where I would fit in, and it wasn't until I was at college that I got involved. I was doing QS courses, and I sort of realised that was the bit I was really enjoying. So that led me on to eventually getting an indentureship with Berners-Sunley, which was the equivalent of an apprenticeship at the time, except for the sort of professional trades. So site management, QSing, that sort of thing. So that's how I got into it.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Gary. Then looking at your CV, in those early days, your role seemed to progress quite quickly. As you said, initially you were the trainee, then you were an assistant trainee, then you were, an assistant surveyor, then you were a managing surveyor. You seemed to progress quite quickly. I've gone mute, sorry. So how did that happen? Did you get given chances? Did you just excel? Talk us a little bit about the early days once you left college.
Yeah, I guess when I was working my career path started working for contractors rather than the sort of the consultancy route. And at that time, back then, it was a really busy time for the industry, and I think they're just the companies that I were working for were all relatively young and expanding and growing, and therefore the opportunities were just there. And if you were prepared to put the time in, and you did a good job, then there were opportunities to progress. And they were taking on each year. They would be taking on a number of new trainees. So they were always looking to move people up the ladder. So I guess for the first 10 years of my career, every few years there was the opportunity to move up and move on. So that was more driven by the industry being really buoyant at the time, I think.
And do you know what? Something else that struck me is that you were kind of sticking to companies for chunks of time. And I think when I look at people now that are kind of leaving college and leaving university, it seems like they flip jobs much faster. And it did strike me. I mean, like yourself, I've stuck to companies for big chunks of time, but it doesn't seem to be the case anymore, which is, it's not a question to you, but it's just a comment that kind of jumped out from your CV. There was something else, Gary, that then in kind of 1999, it seems like you were leaving the surveying world. I mean, still within the industry, but you then started getting into like commercial director. Was that kind of a conscious decision that you were saying, actually, I'd rather get into management?
Well, at that period, that was the time actually where I joined a company, Charles Barrett, who my uncle had been managing director of some 20 years before, and so it was purely coincidental. And a bit like before, I guess I found myself in a situation where I was heading up the commercial team within that business, and then the managing director left. The business had just been bought by Waits. It was a sort of a specialist interior fit-out joinery business, so they needed someone who sort of knew that world rather than importing somebody from the sort of Waits construction business. It was a very different. You needed sort of a different outlook on life. So again, it was one of opportunity. I was given the opportunity to look at running that business, but I think the downside was having stepped into that role and very quickly realised that that wasn't what I really enjoyed doing. I enjoyed delivering projects. Not necessarily managing managing companies. So it was at that point where I decided I needed to change, and an opportunity arose at Morgan Stanley. They were looking for some help because they were doing massive amounts of work at Canary Wharf back in 99, 2000. They were outsourcing everything and realised they just didn't have any internal governance around what they were doing in terms of procuring and budgets and all that sort of stuff. So there's an opportunity over there. So I decided to jump from poacher to gamekeeper and move from a contractor to a client, and so that's how that change came about.
And just the scale of the operations, it must have been quite daunting, because I mean, Morgan Stanley, Canary Wharf, heading the cost management for such a big American banking client must have been a different mindset. Did you feel that or not?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, coming out of working for contractors, where it was a very much sort of you're in control of your own destiny, and a lot of working for a contractor is about, you're going to make a profit for the business, and it's all about cost and keeping costs to a minimum. Whereas Morgan Stanley, there was a culture of, and money wasn't the issue, I guess, which was the biggest change for me. It wasn't about money; it was about quality. And about delivery, and they were delivering a number of projects, as I say, at Canary Wharf, from massive trading floor refurbishments to back new build fit outs for back of house functions, spending tens of millions of pounds, every year on that. And it was a very different culture to move into. To say, it was nice not to have to worry so much about the money side of it. The money was there, but the culture was quite difficult. Lots of egos, lots of people wanted to have their say. Lots of people thought they were experts, so they were employing us as experts to deliver projects for them, but then they wouldn't let you necessarily deliver them because they wanted to be part of the decision-making process. So it was a different set of, I guess, a different set of challenges when moving across to being a client.
Okay, and was that international? Was that an international role when it says head of cost management? Was that regional?
Yeah, well, that was EMEA, so UK and Europe. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was there much more traveling as well?
Yeah. I suppose that was. I've done a little bit of traveling before, but that was the start of more traveling. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, and was part of it,
as everyone says, not as glamorous as it sounds.
Yeah. And then 2005, 2008, again progressing, head of strategic program management, a Swiss bank this time. How did you change roles? How was that word of mouth? Was it somebody you'd met? Were you headhunted? Just to understand how that change happened.
Yeah, it was exactly that. I was pretty happy at Morgan Stanley, but I bumped into someone whilst I was working there who ended up running the sort of corporate services team, or been brought in to reset the corporate services team at UBS. UBS were a very traditional Swiss bank, very old-fashioned. They, up until that point in time, they literally had one architect, one QS, one project manager, one contractor. And that's how they operated on all of their projects. There was no competition, and there was obviously concerns around governance and value for money. So they were making a big change, and somebody that I knew from Morgan Stanley was brought in to head that up. I'd been there a few months, and then gave me a call and said, "Look, you need to." A clean sheet of paper, would you be interested in coming and setting up a whole new team over here? So, and it probably, as you said, chunks of time. I've done 5 years at Morgan Stanley. That seemed to be my limit for companies at that point in time. It was 5 years and then changed. So I was about that time. So I decided, to give it'll be a different type of a challenge, but a new challenge going into a business that needed resetting, so an opportunity to put your own stamp on it.
And then what I'm going to take you away from the working world, and I'm going to take you to the BCO aspect. So you were obviously president of the BCO for a year, but you've been involved in BCO for a long time. I just wanted to understand, first of all, how you got involved in the BCO, but then for the people that are listening, it's what is the difference between being a member of the BCO versus being part of the actual kind of management committee, and what are the benefits of being part of such an organization?
So the way, actually, interesting, the way I got involved with BCO was through Richard Beestall, who you mentioned earlier. You know, a terrible shock and loss to the industry, with Richard passing only a few weeks ago. And like you, my condolences go out to Martin and his family and all at TP Bennett. But it was Richard, who was already involved with BCO, who I worked with quite extensively at Morgan Stanley. That TP Bennett did quite a bit of work for me there. I got to know Richard and the guys really well. And the BCO at the time was struggling to get occupiers to be part of the BCO. It was very much a sort of consultant led organisation. So I joined the BCO initially as a member, and then I got talked into joining the occupiers group, which Paul Harrington, who was at PwC at the time, was leading. And things just progressed from there. I mean, I ended up chairing the occupiers group, and then in, I think, about 2010, I got a phone call out of the blue to ask if I'd be interested in taking over the presidency. They run a 3-year progression. So you're a junior vice president, senior vice president, and then president. So you get a 2-year lead in, and then your year as president. But it was absolutely fantastic. I mean, I would have to say, you know, if you'd asked me 5 years before that if I thought I'd be president of the BCO or whether I would even want to be president, I would have absolutely said no. I mean, I couldn't see myself doing it. Couldn't see myself up on stage talking to large groups of people. In some respects, still can't believe I did it. It's one of those things, and I guess a bit of advice would be, sometimes it's all very easy to say no to these things. You know, you get offered something that puts you outside your comfort zone a bit, and it's very easy to say no. But sometimes you should just say yes and worry about it later, because it was a great experience for me. I had three great years, and probably most important, my network across the industry, and the real estate world grew exponentially. And I think that's a great lesson for anybody, and any youngsters listening who want to get on in the industry. It's all about your network. You've got to get to meet people across the industry, through Cornet, through BCO, through Women in Property, through all of those organisations. It does mean you have to put your own time into it, and you know, it's not 9 to 5. You have to make your own time to get involved in some of these things. But if you're really looking to get the most out of the real estate industry and construction industry, and it's worthwhile, I would recommend it to anybody.
Where was the trip on your years of, because the BCO does an international trip, don't they?
It was a very low-key trip to Geneva.
Okay. I
think it was potentially one of the most expensive BCO trips on record at that point, because Geneva is not a cheap place to go. But again, we saw some fantastic buildings down there, and TP Bennett were working in Geneva at the time and organised a lot of the site visits for us. So it was a fantastic conference.
Very good. Well, thank you. And then the BT part of the career, again, looking a little bit behind, you know, you've been at a big American bank, a big Swiss bank, and then BT, obviously a major British multinational headquartered in London. But what struck me was that it was only in 1993, I hadn't realized it was that, it wasn't that long ago, that the UK government sold its stake in BT. So again, culturally, it must have been a very different mindset for the workforce that were there. You were looking after a huge portfolio of, 8,000 odd buildings. And it must have been a hugely challenging role. So it was just a little bit to understand what was the cultural shift from UBS to BT, and what were some of the hurdles and highlights of your time there?
Yeah, so I guess, but you're right. BT was a complete cultural shift. With the banks, money was not particularly the issue. It was more about quality and speed to market. It was exactly the opposite with BT. A huge portfolio, as you said, nearly 8,000 buildings across just the UK. But very, very tight budgets, and trying to spend money wisely and in the right place. on an ageing estate, because as you said, a lot of the BT estate came out of the original sort of public sector. So if you can imagine, you see them in every town around. If you look at for the ugliest and most unloved building in the middle of town, it'll be a BT building. And the crazy thing is that those buildings are housing, the country's infrastructure in terms of telecoms and mobile to a certain extent. So it was very different. The nice thing about BT was that the people there did recognise that they were employing people for their skill sets, so they would let you get on with it and make decisions. So it was almost the exact opposite to the banks. We could make our own decisions. We were left alone to get on with our job. We just didn't have the budget to do it properly. Generally, it was always a struggle. But it was a great experience, and the range of projects. Before that at the banks, it was city-based office, commercial office fit out with a bit of data centre thrown in occasionally. But with BT, that estate, it's got a big office estate, it's got a big data centre estate, call centres, motor vehicle workshops, engineering centres, the whole gambit of different types of real estate to get involved with and look after. So it was a really enjoyable time. And having said I only stopped places 5 years, I was 10 years at BT, and it went in a flash. It really did.
And now you've jumped ship and you've moved to Boston Consulting. I always think that management consultants and lawyers are probably the most difficult, the most challenging companies to work in, because I think a lot of their staff have been trained to analyze, to argue. So going from BT to Boston Consulting must be a little bit more challenging. I don't know, in terms of the people that you're having to report to. Tell us a little bit about the role there and the differences that you're encountering in the new role.
Yeah, I hadn't actually planned to get another full-time job. I have to say, I sort of fell into this one. But so I'm just concentrating on looking on delivering Boston's new London office portfolio. So we've got taken a new space at Big Charlotte Street, and I'm looking after that build plus some other ancillary bits and pieces around London. So we're sort of bringing the business back together, which has been slightly interrupted and perhaps disrupted by COVID, which has not been a bad thing. That allowed Boston to make some changes they've been planning to make around the use of their space, but we're sort of finding it difficult to do when you're, as you said, working for a partnership is quite difficult. There's 76 partners in London, all own part of the business. They've all they want to make sure that their new building that they're spending tens of millions of pounds on is going to deliver what they need. So but having said that, I have to say the people that I'm working with at Boston are fantastic. They love to analyse everything. You're right. They love data. But again, when it comes down to the actual delivering of the product and the project, they are very good at taking a step back. And partly that's because they're all very busy with their day jobs. But it is challenging. You can't put it all over everybody's eyes. At BCG, you've got to be right at the money with everything you're reporting on. Get pulled out. But it's good. I'm enjoying it. We're delayed slightly through COVID, but we're on site. We're working through to delivery next May probably, and I think we're going to deliver a fantastic product for Boston, and hopefully we'll have the BCO judges around at some point.
And Cornet event to showcase the space, Gary. I think you meant to say.
Absolutely, yeah. To be fair,
Gary, we've actually got.
BCG are very keen, actually, because they're so proud of what they're doing here. They are very keen to market what we're doing. So absolutely, Cornet would be more than happy to come along.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll hold you to that. Stephen Masterson of TP Bennett has just posed a question saying that I've asked you about the differences culturally, but what is there a single theme that was consistent across the various sectors that you've worked or the various companies?
I guess, in a word, it might be impatience. I think the one theme across all of it is that they spend a lot of time talking about what they want to do, and then very little time allowing you to do it properly. So program, timing, that's the one. Ever since I've been working for the client side, that's been the one thing that's always been a constant. We always spend too much time deliberating and not enough time delivering. That's probably the consistent. Yeah.
Okay, and that brings us to kind of where you are today. So thank you very much for sharing that. We've obviously, since March, we've been in lockdown. I just wanted to hear from you how you've coped with it work-wise, but also as an individual. I know that a lot of our members have struggled a little bit being at home all the time. What has it meant for you?
If I'm honest, I've been pretty lucky. I mean, 10 years at BT were fantastic at working agilely. So I actually spent a fair amount of time working either from home or from other places. Anyway, so working from home has just not been an issue. It's something you used to be doing for a long time. And in a similar way, where we were with the project, we literally just finished the contractor interviews when this all happened. So we were in that sort of final design and sort of negotiation stage with the contractor, which we could do virtually. So we were really lucky for the final interview. So been really busy. Literally, it's been full on for the last few months, which has been great. I guess the downside is you do end up just sitting in front of the screen all day, which is a problem. And I'm lucky I live out in Suffolk. We've got some great countryside, so we just got used to making sure on a daily basis we go out for a walk and get some fresh air. It's just really as simple as that. I think just got to train yourself to shut the laptop at certain points in the day and walk away. And that, that's what I do. Other people, obviously do other things, but it is very easy just to end up being all day. Before you know it, you've done 7 or 8 hours. It just needs to be careful.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely about that too. And I've also got 2 kids, and I don't know if I said to you, Gary, but some days I'd go down and they'd had Doritos for lunch or Oreos for breakfast because you hadn't realized that you'd been on 3 conference calls and it was kind of 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So no, it's a dangerous world where you're just going from call to call.
Yeah.
Can I also ask a little bit, talking about family? I know you have a daughter, and your daughter has kind of followed in your footsteps. Was that her, is it you giving her that kind of inspiration? Have you helped her? What advice, have you been able to offer her? So she's is a structural engineer.
Yes. Emily did a master's at Loughborough. She's civil engineering, and did really well. Came away with the first, so we were immensely proud of her. I think actually her choice to go into construction, I think, was probably hers rather than anything that I did. If I remember rightly, it was actually some engineers came into her secondary school and did a session during the maths lecture around designing the Pringle roof on the velodrome, I think it was.
Okay.
And that sort of caught her attention because she liked maths and physics, but sort of wanted to be able to apply it in a practical way and hadn't really thought about engineering. So I think that's how she sort of got herself into civil engineering. Obviously, when I can, I help out, but she's doing pretty well. I know when she in a year out, she was working at Waterman's, where she works now, and she was invited to do a session. I think it was Clark Moore Design Week, actually, for possibly Women in Property, something like that. They were trying to get views from different groups, and I wasn't there, fortunately, but when asked if she wanted to follow my footsteps, she said yes, she wanted to come to work to go to lunch. That was that's her ambition.
And on that note, Gary, we thank you so much. I'm sorry that we can't get through. We can't open up the questions because it's already 2:30. But thank you so much for your time. Very grateful indeed for your openness and your warmth. And talk to you soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.